Hello YouTube, and welcome to Total War Rome 2, the Wrath of Sparta campaign, where in this episode I'm going to mostly be talking about, this campaign is about the Peloponnesian Wars, for those who don't play Rome 2, and that's what I'm going to be talking about this episode, mostly. So, why they started, who fought in them, and so forth, give a bit of background to this before going on in my next video to talk about Athens, who I'll be playing with. Though I will talk about Athens a little bit now, just talk about their abilities. So they've got this one here, the wooden wall. This is referencing the fact that Athens' power and Athens' defense lay in its fleet. So just as the Spartans would say that their spears were their wall, so their warriors were their walls, the Athenians would say that they had a wooden wall in their fleet that would protect them from invaders. Center of culture is referencing the fact that Athens was a big cultural and philosophical center for the Greek region. And dreams of empire, where basically all their people are less happy with them, is referencing the fact that at this time the Athenians had started building an empire of the previously free Greek city-states, which was in many ways the sort of precursor event to this war. The Greeks loved their freedom, and each city loved being free, and when Athens started to force that out of them and build an empire, it made them unhappy and eventually got Corinth and Sparta involved, which led to the start of the war. Anyway, we'll go play the intro video now. So this intro video is of a council at Sparta, and we have the guy in the armor, not the guy on the throne, but the other guy in the armor is a Corinthian delegate. I'm not entirely sure who the other guy arguing with him is, because he seems to be Spartan, but he's not using the argument recorded for Spartans by Thucydides.
You would see all of Greece under the heel of Athenai, cowering from them like chided slaves. We spilled blood at Potidea, but now we need allies. The might of Sparta will hold their ambition.
Your flattery is wasted. You know not what you ask.
All eyes look on Sparta, and this is what you would have them see. From birth, a Spartan is trained for one purpose.
Here goes the Spartan glorification video.
You do not understand.
So side note, they didn't use swords much in battle, no one did. Swords with sidearms, not a primary weapon. And in a minute a guy will throw a spear. Here we go. You can't throw the stabbing spears, or you can't very effectively throw the hoplite stabbing spear. It's just weighted all wrong for it.
Then from chaos, we will rise.
So a decent scene, referencing the sort of council that took place in Sparta before the war, where Corinth made their case. Spartans discussed among themselves, and there was even some Athenians there.
The Hellenic League, formed to take the fight to the invaders, did not last. Suspicious of the ambitions of Athena, Sparta and many other great city-states left. They were right to be suspicious. Athena has turned the league they formed into an empire under their control. It is now less a collection of independent cities and more a series of bases for their powerful navy. In the face of Athenian hegemony, Sparta has reformed the Peloponnesian League with Corinthus and the smaller Boeotian League of Cities. As these two powerful groups face off against each other, war is brewing. Let us not forget the Persians. Their empire still stands and keeps a careful eye on developments in Greece to make sure that no single group becomes too powerful. Athena is already at war. Clashes with Corinthus have begun. In the west, the island of Corcyra has appealed to the Athenians for help against its colonial masters. A fleet has already been dispatched to help them. To the north, Olympus has become a target. Far from its homeland, it is a target ripe for conquest. It is vital that Athena hold all of its cities and meet Spartan military might on land with its impressive navy. True dominance over all of Greece awaits the victor.
Right, so I laid the scene a bit for us there. I'll try and give you more gameplay too. If you watched my Huns videos, basically I just scrolled around the map, which is cool, but try and do more things while this is going. Cool, I have a fleet here already. Right, so basically the scene, that always distracts me when that comes up. The Persian Wars had ended, I'm not sure how much before this, but during the Persian Wars, where they'd conquered a fair way into Greece, a league was formed. Greece has never really been, at least before modern Greece, was never really a united country. It was a whole bunch of free city-states of varying powers and with varying customs and so forth. And they all sort of, actually they did a lot of squabbling among themselves, but also cooperated sometimes. The Greek culture was sort of overarching, but each little city-state had its own differing culture and emphasis. So Athens and Corinth were trading powers. Corinth focused a lot more on wealth and opulence, Athens more on philosophy. Sparta was the military power with their very strict training for their citizens. Thebes, another important province, was also, or at least became, a military power, eventually defeating Sparta in battle and sort of crushing the power of Sparta. And Delphi was the place of the Oracle of Delphi, and various other things. So, point being, Greece was not a very united country, and the Persian Empire, having united most of the Middle East, or nearly all of it by that point, I think, they decided to march on Greece and started going through land, so up through here, conquered quite well, and they didn't get, and as they made their way down, eventually these southern Greeks decided to unite to oppose them. Not all though, some did fight on the side of the Persians, I'm not sure which ones, and a lot of the conquered states up here switched sides and fought for the Persians. Indeed, I think that's how Athens got some of the lands up here. They'd fought for the Persians, so the Hellenic League conquered them afterwards. So the Hellenic League was formed to fight Sparta under to fight Persia under Sparta and Athens, them two being the strongest city-states at the time. Sparta was officially in command of everything, but Athens took a big role in commanding the fleet. Because at this point, Athens was still sort of new. It had been around. It's a very old city-state, but it only sort of started growing in power and importance, whereas Sparta had been established for quite a while. And it was only really during the Persian War that Athens came to both realize its own potential and be seen and feared by that from those around it. And eventually as the Spartans kept pushing down, and eventually they got to, not actually sure where Thermopylae is, but it's pretty low. So I know even Athens, the land Athens was on, was conquered. So interesting fact about Athens, during this war, according to Thucydides, they actually abandoned their city, and the entire population of the city sort of set out in ships till the war was gone, so that the Greeks could hold off the Persians down here. And when the Greeks did, through Thermopylae and Salamis, the Athenian naval victory, and various other places, they and the Persians retreated. That league sort of stayed for a little bit, but it had come to be dominated by Athens, at least after Sparta left. I'm not sure if Sparta left before or after Athens started turning it into an empire, but that is essentially what happened. As soon as Sparta left, Athens was the strongest member of the league and began to dominate the others. The terms of the new Spartan Athenian Empire, I guess, was basically that the states that were in it would pay a tribute to Athens and give ships or men or whatever was needed to Athens, and Athens would run the military and the fleet. So basically they were paying for Athens to take up the burden of their defense, and Athens was the main contributor in these areas. And originally the terms of the league was that any time a city-state wished to leave, they could, but that was broken several times because a city-state would try to leave and Athens would conquer them and force them back in. So that whole turning it into an empire thing that had happened. And this, to the Greeks who loved their freedom, it caused a lot of discontent in their allies, and it just caused a lot of tension overall because Athens was suddenly becoming a big power as well. Because not everyone was unhappy with the arrangement. A lot of the city-states were quite happy to be part of the Athenian Empire. They weren't harsh, it seemed. To some city-states they might have been, due to various reasons, but on the whole they were fairly okay with their charges. And they solved things fairly diplomatically. But it still caused tension due to the loss of freedom. And the Spartans also had their own hegemony going on, but it wasn't as direct, whereas Athens would take direct control of a city. What Sparta would tend to just install puppet kings, so they'd put someone in charge who would do as Sparta wanted in the situation. And they generally didn't really care what their allies and their sort of league was doing. They would concern themselves pretty much just with the affairs of Sparta, and as long as it didn't go too much against what Sparta wanted, they would just leave them be. Now, Corinth was part of the Spartan League, and in a lot of ways Corinth was the cause of the war. They were a bit tempestuous in their relationship, especially with Athens. Both were important trade hubs, and they were very competitive, I guess. Corinth was originally the main trade hub because it occupied this place in the Corinthian Peninsula where everything would have, all the trade between here and there would have to pass. as well as being on the coast. And so Corinth was a very important land trade route, but as land trade sort of declined in importance, Athens started to become more powerful because ships started to be used a lot more. Trade went from longer areas, from different countries beyond Greece, and it just started to eclipse Corinth in importance and wealth. So there was a bit of tension there as well. So Corinth and Athens had a frosty relationship for a while. Sparta and Athens, on the other end, were fairly content with each other. The Spartans respected the Athenians for their role in the war. They actually, after the war, as Athens had been destroyed by the Persians, the Corinthians didn't want them to rebuild the walls around Athens, didn't want them to be allowed to, but the Spartans decreed that they were allowed to rebuild their walls, and so Athens did. And they had a pretty good working relationship. It got a bit tense towards the end as Athenian power grew and started to threaten Sparta's power. In a lot of ways, this war was just about power. Who had the most influence over Greece, making sure no one got too strong. So Sparta had good relations with that, but tensions had begun to rise as Spartans began to feel that power and even fear it. So there was a battle against a Helot rebellion, I think, and Sparta called for the assistance of other Greek states in putting it down, and Athens sent quite a large army to go take it down, and other city-states sent that as well. But seeing the large army and seeing how effective they were, Spartans sort of began to fear them and fear whether they would just go straight home afterwards and so forth. And whoops, I just sent a fleet to attack Sparta. Oh well. So yeah, Sparta began to fear that the Athenians, and so sent them back home, saying that they weren't needed. The Athenians sensed that this was a dishonor to them, that Sparta didn't trust them, and that sort of soured the relationship between them a lot. Athens realizing that Sparta didn't trust them and their intent, and Sparta realizing that Athens could be a threat. And it was sort of into this tension that a large debate came up involving this island here, which is actually surprisingly important, but I'll get to that later, Corcyra, and a little colony up somewhere about here called Epidamnos. So Epidamnos, this here is a Corinthian colony, Corcyra, but a pretty old one, and it risen to a fair bit of importance of its own. And it sent out a colony up into Epidamnos up here, which would then, but that colony of Epidamnos was, colonies would be formed by by people from a particular group, particular city-state often, not always just from that one city-state, but they'd also be sort of founded around a leader, some entrepreneur who would go and convince the people of the city to come with him and try and build a new life in this land. And the colony of Epidamnos had that happen with a Corinthian founder, and then with people from Corcyra. Now, Corcyra had grown a lot in power and influence, and decided that it wanted to, the colonies were expected to show respect and deference to their founding city, but as Corcyra had become powerful, and pretty much as powerful as Corinth, it decided it didn't need to do that anymore, and so tensions had risen there. And Epidamnos up here ended up involved in a civil war. One side called in Corcyra, and one side called in natives of the area, so Gauls, Illyrians, whoever was in the area at the time. But Corcyra refused to help. So the group that called them in then decided to call in Corinth, their founder's city, and the founder of Corcyra, and Corinth did go and help. They began gathering troops and started marching over to break the siege of Epidamnos. And then, but on seeing this, Corcyra didn't like it and tried to pressure Corinth to stop, even applying to Sparta, the leader of the league Corinth was a part of. But Corinth didn't, and considered what they were doing right, continued marching there, and eventually it came to a situation where it was pretty much war between Corcyra and Corinth, and that wasn't really a fight Corcyra could win. They were powerful, they had a very powerful navy, but Corinth was powerful and had allies on the mainland, as well as just being wealthier. So Corcyra called in Athens, and the Athenians were a deterrent for us at first. They knew that war with Corinthians would be war between the Athenian League, which is the Delian League, named after the island of Delos, where the treasury was. I'm not actually sure what island it is. And the Spartan League, which I really should have remembered the name of, but I'll get that for next time. So they didn't want that to happen, but they also responded and did try and defend Corcyra. So they sent a sort of token fleet up of about 10 ships that if the Corinthians were going to besiege Corcyra itself, the Athenian fleet would assist. And the Corinthian fleet and the Corcyran fleet clashed. The Corinthians were winning, and then they did go to push to Corcyra. The 10 Athenian ships joined in, which signaled the start of a war between Corinth and Athens. Athens had also, fearing for their 10, knowing the deteriorating situation and fearing for their 10 ships, they sent another 40 ships up, and these reinforcements arrived during the battle where the Athenian ships had just joined, and the ships sort of broke apart after that, Corinth now being outnumbered and realizing just what had happened, that Greece was now pretty much at war. And that's the situation that got us to a little opening debate there, where a debate was started in Sparta being the leader of the league Corinth was a part of, Corinth and Athens now being effectively at war. Corinth was trying to call Sparta into it, and Sparta was very hesitant to join that war. Sparta liked the Athenians. They were content with peace. That's the thing that the intro gets wrong there, is that the Spartans, at least according to Thucydides, did not actually want the war so much. They didn't want Athens to have control of Greece, and that's what eventually swayed them to join, but they recognized Athenian power, and while sure of their own, they didn't want to be plunged into a war because of the tempestuous Corinthians. And so that guy, who I thought might have been a Spartan, he was, in Thucydides' account, it was one of the Spartan kings who actually said, "This is a big decision we're making here. Let's be careful about this. We don't know what happens in war. Lots of things can change. Let's not rush into this," which they did in that video by talking about Pandora's box. So you don't know what you hold or what you'll unleash. I don't think there was too much worry about Persia at the time. I think that's more added into this campaign just to give you a bit of endgame challenge. But obviously, Persian Empire was still there and could be a threat still. But yeah, that led to that council, and the end decision was that Sparta and their allies would join the war on Athens and its allies. So that gets us here to the start of this campaign. I should have started a timer, I don't know how long I'm in. But anyway, I'll end it there. Again, not having any gameplay, but I'll try change that next time. It takes a bit of getting used to talking and controlling things at the same time. But I'm still new, I'm learning. Anyway, until next time, YouTube.